All right, and welcome to our live Q&A entitled Staying Motivated. I am your host, Cathy Morenzie, and I am excited about bringing this session to you. Um, as I was sharing earlier, we just finished our Thanksgiving here in Toronto, Canada, and let's just say I had a tough time. So I was definitely in need of motivation, as were some people in our Haven program also. So I felt that this was a great time for us to talk about and follow up with motivation. So here's what we're going to try to cover in the next 45 minutes. So I am going to answer any question you have. So, regarding motivation or just any other health and fitness question that you might have. I'm going to talk about how to fight discouragement. So, if that's where you are right now, then you'll want to listen up. We're going to talk about why your current method may not be working. That is, if you're not getting results, let's talk about what some possible reasons could be for that. We're going to talk about what to do when you're not seeing any changes, or you have a weigh in and your weight actually goes up, which sometimes can happen. We're going to talk about how to increase your chances for success. And then we're going to look at some techniques and strategies to incorporate into your program. All right. Is there anything else that you guys would like to see covered that you don't see on here? All right, so let's open up in prayer. I'm going to ask you, if you're multitasking right now, just to focus on my voice and just take a couple deep breaths, and let's just really take this time and enjoy this time together and learn what God is speaking to us, because I believe every time that we get together, God is divinely ordained this time, and there's something for us to get in this. So, Father, we just thank you for this time that you've set apart, knowing our busy schedules, Lord, the fact that we take this time out to come together and share with each other and help each other. We don't take it for granted, Lord God. So we look to you for our inspiration right now. We look to you for our strength, that you would strengthen us, Lord, when we lack motivation, when we lose our way, that you would be the one to bring us back, that our motivation would come through you, Lord God, and not through anything else or anyone else. Empower us so that we want to be our best selves, the us that you've called us to be. Your word says that you created us in your image, Lord God, and so our desire is to reflect that in our health, in our bodies, and in our daily lives. Help us to see ourselves as you see us, Lord. That's whole and complete, and that's lacking nothing. So we pray that our lives will be changed as a result of our time together. We just commit this time now to you, and we offer this time up as a time of worship to you. And we give you all the glory and all the praise in this time. Amen. All right, so let's go right into the first question, and that is how to fight discouragement. And so I just brainstormed a number of points here, and what I'd like you to do is take some time and just type out something. If I don't talk about it, then type it out, and we'll add it to this list, so I can type right away as we're going through this. So I just think I've lost someone. All right, so the first part of fighting discouragement is to realize that, yes, we do get discouraged, but know that discouragement is not from God. And so you can feel discouraged and start to take action to not dwell too long in it, because before you know it, the enemy is filling your head with just negative and telling you that you'll never do it and that you'll never accomplish it and you might as well give up. So the first point is to understand and and acknowledge that discouragement is not from God. And in that, to learn to distinguish God's voice, because God's voice isn't a voice of condemnation or judgment. His voice is often and usually encouraging and affirming and loving, convicting for sure, but not, there's no condemnation in that. So that's one way, is when you're feeling discouraged, quickly realize that it's not from God, and just imagine how he would speak to you. Another point is to remember that this is a process, and a process has ups and downs in it. So if you're on the call right now and you're feeling discouragement, just realize that that is part of the process. It's not always a rosy weight loss every week, even though that's what we would like to see. Weight loss is not like that, and life is not like that. And weight loss does follow life. So you're going to have, maybe 2 good weeks, one bad week, and then a good week. And I don't even like using the terms good and bad, because you'll just have one week where you release weight and one week where you don't. And that's just how life is. Another point to fight discouragement is to fight with self-talk and to use the word of God to stop the voices that are in your head. So you've got to talk to yourself. You've got to encourage yourself. You've got to build up yourself using God's word. And there's a lot of self-help programs that give you all kinds of affirmation. And I think they have a place, but personally, I believe that you've got to speak God's word, because that's what he's given us as our weapon. So I say talk to yourself, but also talk back, meaning talk back to the devil, meaning, and I've had a couple fits where I've gotten so mad that I found myself just cursing him, and like I was in a literal war with him. And you've got to open your mouth and speak. Or you just imagine if somebody were attacking you, would you just say, "Oh, stop"? You would be vocal and you would get angry about it. And it's that same righteous anger you want to have to help fight your discouragement. Another point is to remember where you came from. And what we do is we tend to look at how far we have to go still. Oh, my goal is not until next year. Or, oh, I haven't lost anything in 6 weeks. I'm stuck. And so I encourage you to look back, like, where were you 6 months ago? Where were you 1 year ago? And when you can look back at where you were, that will help to realize that, okay, it's not nearly as bad as I'm feeling, because 6 months ago, a year ago, I was not doing any physical activity. I was feeling terrible. I weighed another 40 pounds. So always look back, and instead of just looking at where you're at. Also remember the other benefits. And so the problem is that we are so focused on the scale. And I mean, I'm right up there too. In Haven, we have our Friday weigh-in. And I find myself even today thinking about, okay, what can I do so that that number looks good on the scale, and it's so ridiculous. And I continue to work on it. But I have to remember the other benefits of the exercise, and I have to remember how great I feel now that I've cut the carbs almost out of my diet, with some slip ups here and there, and how great I feel when I'm sweating. And there's a whole list of other benefits. So I encourage you to make a list of the benefits instead of just focusing on my weight has not moved. Another way to fight discouragement is, I say, to recalibrate and recommit, meaning if you have been plateauing for a while, recalibrate means, okay, so what do I need to change? Do I need to change my goal? Do I need to change the action steps that I've laid out for myself? So if I said next June, do I need to move it to July in lieu of what's happening in my life right now? Or how do I bump up my exercise, or what can I change in my meal plan? And the recommitment part is, once you've set your goal, you're constantly recommitting back to it, because sometimes you're going to forget that goal. So this part of this process is a constant recalibration and recommitment to your goal. This next point is somewhat similar to what I've already said. Focus on what you have and not on what you lack. And I find this comes a lot from comparing ourselves to other people. We look at what they have, what they're able to do, how much exercise they're able to do, how much weight they're losing. And we're looking at ourselves and saying, well, why can't I do this? Why aren't I losing as much as this other person? So, in this point, I'd also say to try and avoid comparing yourself to other people, but focus on what you have. So, um, we're always comparing ourselves to others. So, someone who weighs more is probably always comparing yourself to you. Some people aren't able to exercise. That is such a luxury, and we take it for granted because we're looking at the other person who's a marathon runner or something like that. And the last point, again, it ties in, but focus on your health. So if you're not focusing on your weight or the scale, but you're focusing on decreasing your blood pressure, you're focusing on decreasing your risk of diabetes, decreasing your incidence of heart disease, keeping your bones and your muscles strong. When you focus on the health parameters instead of the number on the scale, discouragement goes away a lot faster because you realize it really is not just about the number. And again, I say that I'm also guilty of focusing on the number, and sometimes that can be discouraging. But you've got to, just as quickly as the discouragement comes in, you've got to use some of these strategies here to bring yourself back to how well you're really doing. All right. Now let's look at, and this part is a little bit tougher because when we are called on our stuff, and it's just our human nature to get a little bit defensive, especially when we know that we're not necessarily where we want to be. So we just finished talking about discouragement, and I just finished saying that to fight discouragement, but also on the other hand, you have to make sure that you're doing all that you can. So here are some of the reasons why your current method may not be working. And there's 5 points here. So just see which one of these would pertain to you. And if we're honest with ourselves, most of them do pertain to us. Let's just make sure you guys are still awake. So I want you to type in the box. The 5 of them are: we don't like change. We don't like submission. We're afraid of pain. We're led by our emotions. We're not mentally tough or tough enough. Out of these 5, how many would you say apply to you so far? So just think about that as I'm going to start talking. I just want to make sure that we stay interactive here, although I think somebody's on a phone, so you might not be able to type in. And we got all of them. Okay. So I'm on the right track. Let's keep talking. So we don't like change. And all of this, again, none of us are exempt from this. This is our human nature. And I think when we can understand that our human nature fights against change, then it makes it so much easier to not get defensive, but just to continue to understand, okay, this is me and this is life and this is how it's going to be, and just to pick up and go on another day. So we don't like changing from the smallest things. Bottled water, to change from one brand to the next for some people is difficult. To change from one brand, and it might be very subtle differences, but the fact is we don't like change. So if it's to wake up 2 minutes earlier, sometimes we don't like change. And so when you look at your own fitness program, when you look at your own weight loss journey, you have to understand that it requires a lot of change. And the goal is to find the right balance between, okay, I realize I need to change and I'm going to embrace it. and also not being overwhelmed and learning how to see change as a good thing. Because when you take on the journey of releasing weight, if you're going to exercise every day, that means your life has to change enough that you're now going to find an additional 30, 40, an hour of time, which means something has to drastically change. I mean, that is a lot of time. If you're making the commitment to eat healthier, that means you might have to go to the grocery store a bit more. That means you might have to spend some more prep time in the kitchen. That means you might have to make time to sit at the table and wash vegetables. So when you undergo a journey like weight releasing, realize that change is going to be a big part of it. And if you're not seeing the results as you want, maybe it's because you're just a bit too resistant to that change. And have a talk with yourself to learn to embrace the change, and maybe don't change so many things so drastically. Now, you do need to make a big jump, but if it's just too overwhelming and you find that you're changing 10 things at once, maybe just to cut that down a bit. Another part of our flesh, our human nature, is we don't like submission. And my husband, who's on the call, can tell you for sure that I don't like submission. But as God's children, He calls us to that, which means we have to submit to one another, which means we have to submit to our spouses, which means we have to submit to our elders and people in authority. And most of all, it means that we have to submit to God. And even in my own life, I noticed that submission when it comes to my health and fitness is still a challenge, because, and it's going back to that change, because I don't like change. God might be telling me to spend some time with Him, but I've got my schedule to do. He might be saying to take the day and fast or to eat a certain way, and that submission to what He's telling me is still difficult. And we miss out on a lot of blessings because we don't like to submit. So that might be another reason why what you're doing isn't working, is because you're hearing God giving you instruction on what to do, and yet you're not doing it. And yet you're still committed to doing things your own way. The next one is we are afraid of pain. And the words probably should be perceived pain, because the things that we're often afraid of really aren't painful at all, but in our mind, we think that when we exercise, it's going to be this excruciating pain that's going to burn through every single muscle in our body and render us incompetent for the next few days, when really exercise is something that's fun and enjoyable, and it feels great. But that perceived pain that we got from who knows where in our lives sometimes stops us. The perceived pain of having to give up our favorite foods, and a feeling of being deprived, and a feeling of, oh, we might die because our stomachs are growling. And I'm talking about myself here. Sometimes that stops me from doing what I really know to do, because of that fear of, but it's going to hurt. And let's face it, nobody wants to hurt and nobody wants to feel pain. But the truth is, going without a certain food is not going to kill us, even though it might feel like it is. And exercise is not going to kill us, and it's not painful. And we actually decide just how intense we want to make it. So look at that. If that's you that has a fear, and ask yourself, do you have a fear of exercise? Is that what's stopping you? Do you have a fear of giving up certain foods? Is that what's stopping you? And just have a look at these things. The number 4 is we are led by our emotions. And that's a great thing about us, but it's also the thing that gets in our way a lot is our emotions. And if you look at people who really succeed, who are at the top of their game, be it athletes or people in the business world or any walk of life, they're able to keep their emotions in perspective. So it's irrelevant whether they feel like doing a task, they're doing it. It's irrelevant whether they are feeling depressed or feeling anxious or any of those emotions. They're still able to say, okay, thank you for sharing emotions, but I've got a job to do and get it done. And that takes mental toughness, it takes emotional maturity, but that's definitely an area that most of us can work on if you find that your emotions are constantly just running roughshod all over your life and keeping you from having the health that you want, especially when it comes to emotional eating. It can be such a powerful, powerful feeling um, when you're trying to avoid some kind of pain. And so the easy solution is work on that underlying emotion. And we know it's a lot more difficult to do, but that is where the real work should begin, is to learn what is behind the root of why am I feeling as I'm feeling. All right, and the last one is we're not mentally tough, and if you just look at the Olympics, you can get a sense of what toughness really is. And a lot of us, I mean, we live the fact that we're living in North America. We have never gone without food. We probably have never gone without water, or we probably have never pushed ourselves to the point of discomfort. And weight release is an area where you do need to push. And if you look at bodybuilders or people who have the bodies that we all covet, they work hard at it. And so the question becomes, how bad do you want it? And are you willing to do the mental grunt work that it takes to get your goal? And so look at these 5 things here: the change, the submission, the pain, the emotions, and the mental toughness. And not that you need to change them all right away, but just to have a look and acknowledge that, okay, these are some of the reasons why what I'm doing is sort of kind of working, but not really. All right. You guys still with me? Any comments so far? Any feedback as I go on to the next slide? No, silence means consent. That means I'm covering every single thing that you were thinking. And let's move on. So the next question: what to do when you don't see changes or your weight actually goes up, which happens. And as I was sharing, from Thanksgiving to a week later, I went up, I believe it was 3 or 4 pounds. Um, and when I look back, I know why, but it is very disconcerting to say when you are committed to a goal and you see yourself going the other way. And so there's a checklist though, and usually as I work with people, it's never a surprise. Like nobody is, or let me say, people are rarely surprised when they step on the scale, because they themselves know that they're not doing all that they need to do in order to reach that goal. So a simple checklist: if you've plateaued, if you haven't moved, and I consider a plateau 4, 5, 6 weeks on. If you haven't lost anything in 2 weeks, that's not a plateau. So 4, 6 weeks onward, that's considered a plateau. So are you exercising most days of the week? And really, when I start with people, I tell them just to move. But if you do have a weight loss goal, then you've got to make some time each day to break a sweat. And it doesn't have to be long. And going for a walk is great, and gardening is great, and housework is all great and necessary. But there's got to be some form of intense exercise most days in order to break a sweat if you want to release weight. And I see in people when they keep their journals that they write that they gardened. Again, great and fantastic, and you're active, but you've got to take it beyond that. Okay, so if a speed walk is going to make you break a sweat, then that's what you're going to have to do. But it's going to require a little bit more where your heart rate's got to be elevated and you've got to feel your heart beating a lot stronger than just a walk. Are you eating low carbohydrate, unprocessed foods? And are you tracking it? And this is where, when people aren't seeing changes, this, what I've noticed, and I've noticed in myself, is where things typically fall apart. Is that you let a little bit of food in here, you have a little taste here, you have a little bit of jam here, a bite of a bagel here, and the next thing you know that your carbs are way up over 100, 150, and you can still rationalize and justify, and I'm talking about myself here, that I haven't been eating pasta, I haven't been indulging in bagels and cereal, but it's just been the little bits here and there that start to sabotage me. And you have to know yourself. So if you are someone when the door opens, you just rushes in and you're not able to control yourself, then you are not the type of person that can allow yourself to have a little bit. Okay, and some people can do that. Some people, I know some people that as long as the bag of cookies are not open, it can sit in the cupboard for a month and never eat it. But if they open it and they have one, then they know they'll have the whole thing. So know yourself and know if you can have one, then have a little treat. That's fine. But if you know yourself and once you open the door, then all bets are off, then you've got to stay away. Another thing to notice if you're not seeing changes are you getting enough sleep? And I shared that in the 21-day challenge this week about sleep is there's two hormones that are released when you're sleeping at night. It's called leptin and ghrelin. And when you're not getting enough sleep, the leptin, which turns your hunger signals off, gets low. So you're actually now craving foods that you normally wouldn't have. You're now hungry because that those leptin levels are too low, so they're not doing their job of shutting off your hunger. And the other chemical called ghrelin, that is the one that's telling you to eat. When you don't have enough sleep, that hormone gets elevated. So what is it doing? It's telling you eat, 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 eat. So both of these hormones are now doing their opposite thing when you don't get enough sleep. And so sleep is most definitely related to weight because of the regulation of those hormones. Stress is another one also. So when you're stressed, cortisol levels are increased, which trigger an insulin response, which trigger a weight gain again. So we don't think about how much stress we're under and how that affects our health and how much it affects our weight, but it has a lot to do with our weight. Are you overtraining? Are you undertraining? Are you doing weights? So overtraining, what happens when you're just pushing your body too much is it actually goes into a stress mode. So it is seeing the training, the exercising as another form of stress. And therefore, once it goes into that fight or flight mode, again, all systems shut down and you're not going to be releasing any weight because your body's main job at that time is to protect itself. So make sure that you're not training too hard. Um, that's not usually the case. I don't usually see that with any other people aside from athletes. Under training, I do see, and that's just because we're on a roll and then we slack off or we get sick or we get busy and something derails us. And are you doing weights? And most women are absolutely petrified of weights. And it's a fear of injury. It's a fear of not knowing what they're doing, a fear of getting muscular and bulky, which is crazy, but a lot of women are afraid of that. So weight training needs to be part of your weight loss program. The more muscle you have, the more fat you're going to burn. So there's a big difference between people who release weight doing weights and people who release weight just doing cardio, and their body looks very different. So for nice sculpted shapely muscles, not bulky but shapely muscles, you need to add weights to your program, and that is going to really help in your success. And as I said before, are extra calories sneaking in? So this is just a little checklist to go through. And how many of you can identify with a couple of these things? Has this been you? If you haven't seen changes or your weight has gone up, is it because of any of these reasons? Would anybody care to confess? Okay, and so I'm not getting any feedback to this question, which means nobody wants to fess up that it's any of these things. So we will move on. Oh, okay. And Laura says pretty much all. I think other people must be on phones because I'm not getting a lot of feedback, but let's just keep plugging away. So this next slide talks about how to increase your chances for success. So first of all, you must track your progress. You must have SMART goals. And remember, SMART refers to they have to be specific, they have to be measurable, they have to be attainable, they have to be realistic, and they have to be time-centered. So track by weighing in each week. Don't let a month go by and realize that, oh my goodness, look at what's happened. You've got to plan for your exercise each week, plan for your food each week, and each week, don't let a week go by where you're not actually evaluating how you're eating, how you're exercising, and what your weight is. Okay, just like what we do in the Haven program, these will increase your chances for success when you track these markers each week. To increase your chances of success, you have to know your why. And this is so important. And we lose track of it. And I would really encourage everyone who's either listening or will listen later to know your why. Why is this important to you? And your why has to be so much deeper than to lose 20 pounds. Um, it's got to encompass your life. It's got to encompass who God's called you to be. It just has to encompass so much more than I want to look good or I want to um, go to my high school reunion in 6 months and have everyone see how great I look. It's got to be a lot deeper than that. So if you haven't already done so, I really encourage you to take some time and write down why is it so important for you to be in excellent health. I'm not going to say good health, excellent health. And you've got to know that. And when you get discouraged, you've got to go back to your why. As you start your week, you've got to go back to your why. And I'm just thinking here as I'm saying this applies to health, but this applies to finances. This applies to so many areas of your life. You have to know your why because that's what's going to keep you going on the days where you just don't feel like going on. Another big factor to increase your chances of success is planning. You've got to plan, 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 plan. So let me ask you for this week, do you have a grocery list? So we're nearing the end of the week. You should already start writing down some of the foods that you ran out of this past week. Start thinking through what your meal plan is going to look like for next week. If you do the groceries on the weekend, what are some of those things that you're going to buy? And I'd say keep a master list of things that you know now you should be going through on a weekly basis, like eggs. Um, like you have your healthy oils, you've got your avocados. There's some things that just need to become part of your daily meal plan. And so make sure those are on the list. Have one day at least that you go out and get these things. I like to plan most of my meals by about Saturday or so. Or actually, I love shopping by flyers. So when the flyers with all the deals come in on Thursday evening, I start my planning then and keep planning on Friday. So I know where I'm going to get all the great deals. But whatever kind of system you use, be sure you're going into the grocery store with some kind of idea of what you're cooking I also like to cook in a way that if I'm making, let's say, cabbage rolls, and I'm also making something else that requires ground beef. So I'll make a double batch it so that I'm not in the kitchen so much. So again, just around planning, try to organize yourself so that you're being efficient when you're in the grocery store. Around planning too, are you prepared for contingencies? So what will happen? What are you going to do if an unexpected event comes up? What's going to happen if you're stuck in traffic for a few hours and you are starving? Do you have some nuts that you keep in the car? Do you have some kind of healthy protein bar that you keep in the car? If you get invited over to friend's house, do you have a plan for that? Can you ask to bring the salad, or can you find out what they're serving? Life just keeps coming at you, and when you're not prepared for it, that's when things fall apart. So to increase your chances of success, plan as much as you can. And it might sound anal, but if this is your goal, then you're going to have to somewhat become anal in order to get your goals. To increase your chances of success, you have to be emotionally healthy, meaning manage your emotions. And I talked about athletes and people at the top of their game, and they're learning to manage their emotions. So if you know that, especially around certain times of the month, you get emotional or you have certain cravings, how do you plan for them? Do you know what are the things that really stress you out? Is your work environment stressful? Is traffic stressful? Is difficult conversations you know you're going to have with your husband or wife stressful? If you know what those stressors are, then emotional maturity means learning and developing plans to deal with them and knowing the end result that you want to have despite of how you're feeling. And this all takes some work, and I realize I'm sharing a lot, and I'm sharing ideally what you can do. So take with from this talk right now the parts that you need the most at this point, and as you work on one area, move to the next one. As you work on one area, move to the next one. Another great way to increase your chances of success are accountability partners. And since starting these challenges, accountability partners have become so dear to me because I'm somewhat shy, believe it or not, and somewhat introverted. But knowing that I not have to, but I'm choosing to be transparent, and I'm choosing to share what's happening in my life and the challenges around food, it really makes a difference when I know that there's people that I'm accountable to, and when there are people that I know that are praying for me. So if you don't have those systems of support, I really encourage you to put them in place, and they really help to increase your chances of success. Also, are you hearing from God? And we talked about submission. Is it first thing in the morning? Is it throughout the day? But do you know what God is telling you about your health? If you don't know, then you're going to allow the TV commercials to tell you what healthy means. You're going to allow whatever the latest diet is to tell you what healthy means. You're going to allow the Kardashians to tell you what healthy means. So make sure that you hear from God and you know what He has told you. And in our Haven program, we have, someone said that they know what God has told them, what they need to give up. And for me too, I know what God has called me to do as far as physical activity. So once you know that, then that's what you keep going back to. And that way you won't be pulled left and right when the latest diet or the latest fitness gizmo comes in. Also, to increase your chances of success, you have to learn how to manage your schedule. So the biggest complaint I hear from people is they're overwhelmed. There is just too much. So there's no time to plan. There's no time to exercise because they're already too busy. We're all too busy. And so have a look at your schedule. And if there's things on it that God has not called you to do, then those things have to take a back seat. My husband and I were listening to a motivational speaker yesterday morning, and he talked about prioritizing your top three things. So, what are your top three? And those top three should correspond to what you give the most of your time to. So if health makes your priority list, then some part of your day has to be allocated to making time for exercise. So I encourage you to look at your top three, and then your time has to be divvied up based on your schedule of your priorities. Another way to increase your chances of success is to stick to one program until you reach a goal. I really believe we have ADD when it comes to our health and fitness. Oh my goodness, we have I don't know, 5, 6, 7 different programs usually going at once. We're in 2 or 3 different challenges, and we've got this many DVDs going, and we're doing the Daniel plan and the this plan and the paleo plan, and then we're fasting and cleansing one day, and we're just jumping all over the place. And so again, this comes from hearing from God, because if God has called you to do something, he's not going to shift. God does not have ADD like we do. So stick to that one program, get the goals that you want. And it might be for a season, but don't leave until you get the goals from that program until God tells you to move on. So that jumping from program to program is not going to get you the results that you're looking for. And last strategy to increase your chances for success is to remember that it all starts with you. You've got to love yourself. You have to have that high regard for yourself to know that I'm exercising because I love myself enough to take care of myself. And we lose sight for that. And I'm saying it as a simple point, but that really should be at the top of the list, because our Heavenly Father loves us with an everlasting love. And when we look at how we treat ourselves, we just don't ever treat ourselves the same way that God treats us. And this, for many of us, can take a lifetime to learn how to love ourselves. But always keep that at the top is love. And so your motivation, your why, is also because we want to learn how to love ourselves as Christ loves us. All right, let me check in on you guys and see, is everybody with me? Who is still there? We've got, I think this is our last slide, or we might have one. We have 2 more slides to go. So great. Okay, we still have full participation. So again, I'm just going to assume, because I'm not getting any questions, so I'm going to assume that I am covering it all just as you need. I am so on it. Okay, so what are some sources of motivation? So this question is around, okay, I'm, for whatever reason, feeling in the dumps. I'm not feeling that attractive. I'm not feeling like I'm ever going to reach my goal. I don't even feel like pulling myself out of this. What to do? And so pretty much all I'm doing is sharing some of my what I do when I'm feeling that way. And I love Facebook because people post, well, some post all the negative, but some people, and a lot of the people that I follow, post incredible inspirational memes that just speak to my heart. So most of us are on Facebook. That's how we connected. So hop on Facebook, visit my fan page, visit some other people who you like to follow, and just get some inspiration from them. And even looking at pictures of people who have that body that you want, who are working hard at it, who are telling you those inspirational things you need to hear, and just ride on their coattails until you can get your own motivation back up. Follow inspirational people too. So Joyce Meyer, is someone who I hop on her page whenever I need some inspiration. There's a few other people also who, again, they just fill you up. They just fill your tank up when your tank is running low. I put our programs in there, our 21-day challenge in the Haven, because we pride ourselves on inspiring and motivating people, especially when they don't have the strength to do it. I sometimes listen to inspirational music, and sometimes that's just the right song comes on at the right time and just gets you out of that funk that you might be in. Sometimes you'll need to do some research on the topic. So if you are, let's say you've plateaued, get on the internet and read about plateauing. Learn about why you might be plateauing. If you're experiencing, let's say, gas, go on and do some research. If you've got a pain somewhere and you're not sure why, go on and take some time and learn. And sometimes just the knowing is enough to get you motivated and back in the game. Prayer is another huge one. And so many times it's, Lord, I don't have the desire or the motivation to do this. Can you please help me? Our good old accountability partners, again, are always there. And I know, Laura, you're on the call, and I know you talk to your accountability partner every day, which is absolutely wonderful. And if you can find an accountability partner like that, that definitely will increases your chances of success. I said this before. Go on and find a photo of someone who's, maybe got the six pack abs, or just who's running a race, or whatever it is, of someone else who has what you desire, and just again ride on their coattails for a little bit to get some of their juice, and until you get back into your own flow. And lastly, and I said this before, remember your why. So why is it you're doing it? When you can go back to your why, sometimes regardless of what you're feeling, you'll just get up and get it done because of your why. So now this question is similar to the last one, but I wanted to get a little bit more specific. So, what are some techniques and strategies you can incorporate into your existing program? So, let's say that you're on the call or you're listening to this and you're frustrated, you're feeling a little bit discouraged. Here are Cathy's top tips, practical tips to help you get out of it. So, you're going to start recording your food records again on MyFitnessPal. And again, it's nothing exciting or earth shattering, but it's just getting back to the basics, simply tracking your food, simply getting back under your 100 grams or whatever you determined of carbohydrates you're going to have, or just going back to basics. Um, if you're exercising, add some interval training or weight training into your routine. And we're starting Skype classes, and we're going to be doing some interval training, because really you can almost cut your workout in half if you can incorporate some weight training and higher intensity cardio into the same workout. So if you're going to be on the Skype workouts in the coming future, then I'll introduce you to interval training then. You might just take a rest day, take a day off, no exercise, just relax a little bit. And sometimes your body might just be overstressed. So if this one is for you. So if you've already been resting, then this strategy is definitely not for you. Okay. A cheat day or rewards day. And again, this just depends on your motivation, but some people um, respond well to knowing that on Fridays or on Saturdays, they're going to go out and they're going to treat themselves to dessert, or they're going to treat themselves to a burger or whatever. I mean, if 80%, 90% of your diet is clean, go on out and enjoy something. Again, you know yourself, because if you're the type of person that you can't eat just two cookies, you'll eat the whole bag, then probably a cheat day is not for you. But if you are able to get back on track the day after, then a cheat day might be, or a cheat meal might be something that's motivating for you. Another one to do this, and my husband loves his pedometer on his phone, is to get something to track your steps. Because if you can do 10,000 steps a day, and that's kind of the gold standard for a good day of physical activity, but it's something fun, it's something motivating, it's something to help you track and gauge how active you are in the day. So if you're feeling somewhat stuck, that might be something else to do, and you can invest in a very inexpensive $10 one, or you can get one with all the bells and whistles. Carb cycling. So that's something that you could try if you are following and you're doing a pretty good job with your food, but you've just plateaued. And pretty much what carb cycling means is one day you're going to go high carbs. The next day you're going to cut your carbs down really low. One day you're going to go high. One day you're going to go low. And what this does is it keeps you motivated, because the thought of low carb every day can sometimes get a little bit boring and difficult. So the premise behind this is you're going to rev up your metabolism by having the carbs in, and then the next day you're going to flush them all out. So you're actually just keeping your tank and your engines revving higher by having this carb cycling. But contact me if it's something that you're interested in, or so do some research on the internet before you just jump into it, because there's all different kinds of ways to do it. Another thing too is to hire a personal trainer. And as I work with clients, I realize that that's what a lot of people need. Whoops, sorry about that. What a lot of people need is somebody who's going to push them harder than they were ever able to push themselves. And lastly, just change it up a bit. Change the routine. Do something different. If you're walking or jogging, go for a run. Um, if you were doing weights, maybe try total body, full body workouts. Maybe try going on a liquid meal plan for a day, just having soups and juices. There's so many different things you can do, but just do something different if you find that you're stuck. And sometimes just that change alone of changing your routine will get your body moving. I think that was my last slide. So there weren't any questions as I was talking through. Does anyone have any questions now of anything that I did not address? So you're either going to raise your hand, um, and I will unmute you if you're on the phone, or just type it into the box, and I will answer your questions. And if there's no questions, then again, I'm going to give myself all the credit and think that I did a fabulous job, because no one's going to tell me any different, because no one is giving feedback here. Okay, so we've got one comment. I'm having a hard time with, let's see. I'll wait for the rest of her question to come in. Okay. That is a good one. That's a great question. That's a really good question. And that's actually a question that I have a difficult time with also. The question is, I'm having a hard time trying to find a replacement for the pleasure I get from food. Hmm. Um, let me tell you my personal experience with that, because I've actually um, have been able to find some replacements that still give me the sensation of the pleasure without the negative effects. So I now drink, I guess you could call it Perrier. I'm not sure what you guys would call it there, but I now drink, it's unsalted, just carbonated water. And so that gives me um, the sensation still of enjoying a nice, refreshing beverage, because it is pleasureful, and I get that people are able just to eat to live and to fuel their bodies. I'm not there yet. So I still look for pleasure in food. So Perrier for me is pleasurable, enjoyable, and calorie free. I've been bragging about my spiralizer. And so that gives me the pleasure of still having pasta without the starch, without the calories, and I'm still able to enjoy it. Um, Another thing, so as far as the food goes, I have put in healthy alternatives to replace some of the foods that I used to enjoy. So I now have 80% dark chocolate, and sometimes I dip it in almond butter instead of the chocolate bar. Um, Let me think of some others that I've done. I've learned how to have my coffee black. I can't believe I would ever do that. So I've found healthy alternatives to some of the foods that I enjoy. But here's the other thing is I'm now looking at why is it that food was so pleasurable to me? And the truth for me here, and I'm just going to be 100% honest, is that realizing that there's big um, holes in my life where I'm feeling um, unfulfilled or not satisfied. And so, what I'm making a concerted effort to do is to try to do things that will take me out of the house and that will have me in a space where it's not about food, but it's about experiencing other parts of life. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, um, I took, I dragged my husband salsa dancing. But just the pleasure of learning a new skill with my husband was something we could enjoy together. Hopefully, one day he'll say that he's going to enjoy it. And so, try a new skill, try hiking, try and something. So, is it a relation piece? Is it relationship with someone? Is it a relationship with your partner that you feel the need to make food pleasurable? Is it with a girlfriend? Is it that you don't feel that you are where you need to be in life? Maybe I'm taking it too deep, but for me, I'm finding that okay, if food is my greatest source of pleasure, then I need to get a life, and that's what I'm telling myself, and that's why I'm seeking out other things to fill. Okay, Lord, what is that hole in me of why food is so pleasurable? And some people, they call themselves foodies. Maybe they are just foodies and maybe they just really do enjoy food, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, am I, well, I know I was, am I getting so much pleasure from food and why is that? So, to answer your question, I would encourage you to really go deep and feel what is that pleasure um, filling the place of something else where I'm feeling unfulfilled. And if it's not, if it's just a matter of I love food and I love the taste, then I would say, get a cookbook and start getting creative and looking, because that's what I'm doing in testing. How can I still enjoy food but not have the calories and all the negative effects of food? Okay, so it's either just a basic physical, practical food replacement, or it's on another emotional, spiritual, relational level where you really need to look at why have I made food one of the highlights of my life. Okay, does that answer your question? I hope that helps. Uh, Yes, definitely a hole in my spirit soul. Yeah. Yeah. And so, you know what? Just take some time, make a list. Like probably about I'm going to say 20, 25 years ago, I wrote a bucket list. I now hate the name of bucket list. But a list of, 100 things I want to do in this lifetime. And maybe subconsciously, as I've gotten older the last 20 years, and I realize, oh boy, I've only hit, 20 of those 100 things. It's time for me to pull that list back out and look at those reasons at where the young Cathy, with all this energy and all of this drive and all of desire and all this zest, wanted to do these 100 things. what happened to that Cathy over the 20 years that transpired. And so it might be looking at, yourself 20, 30 years ago and looking at those dreams and saying, okay, how do I now, start checking some of these things off the list? Because let me tell you, when you are fulfilled, food is not weighing high on the priority, or it's because you have the option to travel to another country to eat this exotic meal. It's not that, oh my goodness, I can't wait to eat this piece of whatever it is. That's not really a big deal. And that's what we've really made food a god and an idol, right, to replace other things. So I would say, just to get some work and to get to work and start dreaming again, and maybe revisit some of those dreams that you had, or if there's some areas where it's just not possible, then what else? And ask God to fill that space or show you what it is that you need to do in order to fill that space. All right. Anybody else? We're past the time. So I'd like to wrap by just sharing with you what's coming up. We're already in the second half of October. So we've got 2 more guest speakers coming up for you for the end of this year. We've got Ginny Edwards, and she's going to help us with overcoming procrastination, which I know, if you've ever been on a diet, if you've ever had a goal, it's probably been an issue for you, and that's procrastination. And then we have our wonderful friend Kimberly Taylor, will be sharing with us on December 4th, and she is going to be talking about overcoming emotional eating. So 2 big important issues that we all need help with. And I trust that you will sign up for these webinars. The link is right here. And I believe the link is ready for you to sign up for Ginny Edwards as of tonight. And then Kim Taylor, let's undo that. And then Kim Taylor will have that sign up ready in the next week or so. So guys, thank you so much for giving me this time. And I hope that I was able to help you. I pray that this time was a blessing. I pray that if you were feeling stuck, that you're moving a little bit more into action. Take 1, 2, 3 maximum things that you've heard from this session and put them into action right away. Don't wait until next week. Don't wait until next month. But take 1 or 2 of those things that you've learned and get busy right away, because you don't want to regret not taking action. You don't want to look at your life a year from now and say, why am I still here? Or, if only I had done this a year ago. So there's nothing worse than, we talked about the pain. There's nothing worse than the pain of regret. So I really encourage you to take the time and do one of those small little things in this process. And I'm believing with you that you will get there. Please, if you got anything from this session, go on to this link here and leave me some feedback. I would really appreciate it. It also helps when other people are thinking about signing up for these webinars. I'm sending you the link right here. Please just leave me some feedback. Let me know. Let me know the top 2 things that you got from this evening. All right. Thanks again, you guys. Have a wonderful evening, and I will talk to you soon. Good night.